Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the grand final to the incredible series of Ghost Soldier by our good friend RICOstories. If you could all take a second to give your thanks to Rico for penning so many classics here on the channel, as he takes time for himself and away from writing. And of course, as ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story and title. The Harpies, Ghost Soldier, the finale. Let's get straight into that. Prologue. From Lilith and the Serpent came evil seed. Part 1. History and Legend. It had been almost a year since the last mission. Lance now needed more aggressive treatments to regulate his condition after the big fight with the Fountain in New Orleans. Maggie also needed treatments to a greater degree than before. They had been on a few small assignments, rolling up small-time vampire groups here and there, but nothing on a large scale. But that was about to change, as Ray called a team meeting with the colourful Dr. Safadi present. Safadi stood with his three-piece suit and fuchsia bow tie. He cleared his throat in typical fashion and announced that northern Italy had been the location of many attacks by what is described as a winged, blood-sucking creatures. We believe them to be mythical harpies of Greek mythology. However, there are more than 10,000 documented caves there, many several hundred meters deep. Also present was Sergeant Nix, Specialist Lee, and newest member, CIA agent Antonio Rousseau, previously assigned to the Vatican. Rousseau had obtained intel about a secret vampire meeting location, where a centuries-old Nosferatu was supposed to be the leader of a local vampire alliance. It was believed to be a huge underground room below an old warehouse near the docks where many vampires socialized and held meetings. The plan was for Lance to infiltrate the meeting and grab up their leader for interrogation. The Harpies were believed to live in the mountainous caves, and if anybody knew their secret location, it would surely be this old vamp. And after an overnight plane ride, the team arrived in Aveano Air Force Base, Italy. There to meet them with transportation to the new HQ was Rousseau's Italian security service counterpart, Agent Lona Pezzini, with AISA, or the Agenzia Informazioni e Sicurezza Interna. After some needed rest, the team planned their strategy to infiltrate the popular vampire night spot that evening. At the meeting were Strigoi, Nosferatu, and even a couple of the cat-like vamps. A dark hooded figure moved slowly through the room, drawing little attention as he smelled much like the others there. He asked for a shot of whiskey and killed it as the meeting got underway. An old Nosferatu named Lucius called the meeting to order. They were concerned about what was happening to their ranks due to this mysterious new team with a vampire-like leader who had a reputation for slaughtering their kind. Little did they know that they were about to have a surprise encounter with these killers. The dark-hooded man ambled towards the back of the crowd, and suddenly he pulled 2 smoke grenades and a high-pitched flashbang percussion grenade from under his cloak and tossed them. 2 team members crashed the main entrance from above, and 2 more entered from the rear exit, tossing more grenades. And there was chaos as the vamps scattered with their hands over their ears, stumbling over each other, unable to see. Suddenly, Lucius felt a syringe in his neck, and everything went black as a hood was pulled over his head. When he awoke, he was in a dark and secure facility, in a restraining chair, and with a hooded assailant sitting directly in front of him. Lance stared at him in the face and said, "My name is Lance, and you are going to tell us what we need to know." Lucius repulsed and loudly proclaimed, "So, you are the butcher who is killing our kind." At that moment, Dr. Safadi entered the room, and as if on cue, he cleared his throat and said, "Lucius, Nosferatu, leader of the ancient Strigoi. I am pleased to meet you." Lucius glared at Dr. Safari as he bared his two large front fangs and said, "How dare you take me against my will? Do you know who I am?" And Safari cleared his throat and responded, "Well, of course I know you. I have studied you and your enterprise for years. You are the wisest and most practical of your kind. Do you not wish to thrive and peacefully coexist with humanity?" Lucius stared with a puzzled look and nodded in the affirmative as if he felt both respect and a degree of appeasement. And Safari continued, "I am sure you are familiar with Pharaoh's fire," as he pulled out a small glass vial from within his lapel. The old vamp's eyes widened as if all too familiar with the contents of the vial. "And of course, I am sure there is no need for a demonstration, now is there?" Lucius gulped as he swallowed and again nodded in an affirmative and took a deep breath. "Very well," said Safari. "You are going to tell us where to find the Harpies, lest you be returned to your establishment in a smouldering heap of charred flesh." Part 2. Faith Embraces Evil. Let's get straight into that. Ray entered the room with Maggie, and Dr. Safari gave Lance a nod, upon which he removed the restraints from Lucius. Ray looked sternly at Lucius and said, "We need to know everything you know about the Harpies." Lucius relaxed a bit and leaned slightly forward, speaking in a raspy Romanian accent. "The Harpies occupy the caverns in the mountains to the north. They have long had an ancient system of catacombs running under the city, and one is said to be under the Vatican. A rogue Jesuit order is believed to be making blood sacrifices to the Harpies in the name of Zeus." As Safari cocked his head with a puzzled look, and Lucius went on. "Yes, Dr. Safari, Zeus worship is still alive in parts of Italy, and has been since the time of the Council of Nicaea in AD 325. But what may surprise you more is that the worship of Lilith is also still in existence. I am sure a learned man such as you would know that both Babylonian and Hebrew lore tell of her historical existence." Dr. Safari cleared his throat and said, "Yes, Lilith was first mentioned in ancient Babylonian text as a class of bird-like winged female demon that attacked pregnant women and infants. She had long flowing red hair and skin white like porcelain. Are harpies not the winged female monsters that hail from Lilith, who was said to be the first Eve?" Lucius nodded and said, "Yes, and after her banishment from the garden, she corrupted it by showing Lucifer the path to the tree of knowledge. Her first offspring came from her unholy union with the serpent." Lucius continued, "Zeus used them as his hunting dogs, and when he sent them on a hunt, blood was their reward. But Lilith was proud and did not like being used for such, and invoked the ineffable name of Yahweh, and flew away. This enraged Zeus, but even he could not control her. She and her flock settled in then the desolate mountains below Olympus." Safari replied, "So that is when they began to hunt, animals and cattle at first, until their bloodlust caused them to again hunt humans." "Yes, they were out of control, and God sent them 3 angels named Senoi, Sansenoi, and Semangaloi, who demanded that she be exiled in hollow earth. But she had already slept with Samuel, chief among the demons, and had given birth to even more harpies. After her exile, her offspring seduced mortal men and gave birth to even more of her screech owls. They would then slaughter the sires of their offspring and feed the organs to the young. For 4,000 years Lilith and her kind were the seductresses and succubuses that roamed the earth, preying upon mortal men. But after her exile, her kind refused the amorous advances of Pan and his satyrs. Pan became enraged and ordered his satyrs to slaughter the harpies on sight. They fled underground, and what remains of them are still there to this day. Dr. Safadi went silent, seemingly in awe of this story, and without even the usual clearing of his throat, asked, "Can you pinpoint where they are and how we can lure them in?" Lucius responded, "In Sumerian lore, these Lilitu were desired by Gilgamesh, and he would place pregnant women in the forest at night, because he knew they loved to cause a miscarriage, so they could feed upon it. But since I am sure your morals won't allow that, you may place some pregnant goats or cows near their cave entrance. That should do nicely." Now Lucius cracked a slight smile while rubbing the scraggly grey whiskers on his chin, and replied, "Yes, Doctor, but there is more. The waning moon approaches, and the queen will be looking for her sacrifice." Lucius continued, "Now, give me a map so I may show you their location and the entrance to the tunnel where they come for their blood offerings from the Jesuits. Oh, and one more thing. If you capture one and tie it down near the cave, its screeches will also attract the others. But beware, they make a sound that could mesmerize a man, just like the sirens of old. And I warn you, except for their wings, fangs, and black soulless eyes, they are beautiful, with bodies like a goddess." Ray nodded and said, "Okay, you have fulfilled your part of the bargain. As long as you leave humans alone, your business endeavors may continue. But be aware, we will always be watching." Lucius nodded, and a hood was placed over his head for his transport back to his establishment. Part 3. Pious Monsters. Lance and Maggie, along with Sergeant Nix and Specialist Lee, would make their way to the cave complex, while Agent Rousseau, Dr. Safadi, and Rousseau's counterpart, Agent Lorna Pezzini, would infiltrate the tunnel in hopes of catching a rogue Jesuit order during a ceremony with Harpies present. It was said to be a dreadful ceremony and involved sacrificing a young pregnant woman near the term or about to deliver. The fetus, tissue, and fluids would be fed to the queen and her consorts. In addition to their normal gear, the men were equipped with a special noise-cancelling earpiece to protect them from the siren song of the Harpies. Lance and Maggie, along with Sergeant Nix and Specialist Lee, boarded a special Black Hawk helicopter 1 hour after sundown for a trip to the mysterious Mount Peligrino, of which the very name means danger. On board they carried a near-term pregnant goat that would be tied at the bottom of the hollow. Reports of strange lights and flying creatures had been reported there for decades. It was near a mountain, not too far from there, where the Emperor Constantine had his famous sighting of a fiery cross over the battlefield, which led his victory against the Ottoman Turks, and his subsequent conversion to Christianity. Yes, this area was truly an area steeped in history, legend, and mysterious lore. The chopper landed in a clearing where a mountain stream formed a small pond, allowing the team to begin their trek. The canopy of trees and underbrush were thick surrounding the stream that gently trickled over the rocks as it made its way down the hillside. They paused to tie down the goat lure, and Lance stepped carefully on the rocky surface, moving up the incline. The team followed several meters behind, carefully scanning the trees for the slightest sign of movement. And just as they approached the tree line, the rocky terrain steepened, and an opening appeared in the distance from where the water emanated. There was a ledge jutting out from the mountainside, revealing a small waterfall concealing a cave entrance. Suddenly, Lance raised a fist and gave the signal to freeze. The team took a knee and scanned the trees, as Lance's nose and ears went to full alert. There was a faint sound that only Lance could hear over the trickling of water. It was the faint whooshing sound of wings, large wings. He gave the hand signal for everybody to hide as he concealed himself within the rocks. 2 figures soared downhill at treetop level, silhouetted against the clear, starry night sky. The team saw a sight few had seen as 2 harpies gracefully rode upwards down the hollow, just over 40 feet above. Now, they were naked, and with firm sculpted statuesque bodies, and their long red hair flowed in the wind. It was truly an awe-inspiring sight. Lance texted the team to stay put while he ever so slowly crept up over the rock ledge to conceal himself by the cave opening as the cascading water softly sprinkled him. In the distance, he heard the faint sound of the goat bleating wildly. He sent 2 words in a text saying, "Advance cautiously." Agent Anthony Rousseau, along with Dr. Safari and Agent Lorna Pezzini, quietly jimmied the manhole cover to make entry into a tunnel system on the outskirts of Rome. They were following a tunnel diagram that would lead them to a junction where an old underground tunnel was supposed to connect to a secret passage to the Vatican. Agents Rousseau and Pezzini quietly trod through the tunnel with Dr. Safari in tow. As they approached the junction with 2 other corridors, dim red lights were embedded into the cave walls, giving off just enough light to make the night optic goggles function. And the strange markings were now slightly visible on the walls. Dr. Safari examined them with a small red light and shook his head slowly, saying, "We are approaching a place of ancient blood sacrifice." It was then that a slight screeching sound softly reverberated through the tunnels. Agent Pezzini pulled out her fluorescent ultraviolet light and whispered to Rousseau and Safari that there was blood splatter on the ground and walls. Safari responded softly, saying that these carvings are that of an ancient blood ritual performed by the Harpies as a tribute to their queen. Part 4. A Dark Faith. Let's get straight into that. Lance and the team crept into place by the waterfall, with Lance and Spec Lee on the left and Maggie with Sergeant Nix on the right. Lance gave the sign to enter, keeping low as the others followed in a staggered order, with Maggie last. Against the orders of Dr. Safari, Lance slightly removed his left earpiece so as to better detect sounds. He heard what sounded like an unintelligible language, crossed with a slight chirping sound. And suddenly, his grandfather Iduda's voice was inside his head. "Little fox, these harpies are what our people called wind walkers. They are swift and elusive creatures, known as the spirits of storm winds. Their wings would take them soaring through the skies as fast as strong winds. Their fingernails are like sharp talons, and their feet are more like a bird of prey. Their eyesight is like that of an eagle, and they can detect the slightest of movements." He slowly peered around the ledge and caught a smell unlike any he had ever experienced before. It was avian, but with a slightly sweeter aroma, accompanied by what he deduced at the time to be urine, human body odor, and decay. But after only 2 more steps, Lance abruptly raised a fist to halt, giving a command to kneel. An area of bones and carcasses lay before them. It was deer, sheep, goats, cattle, and human. Now they quietly crept around the bones and a large cavern opened up. Lance froze as he observed some sort of nest built upon cave ledges and recessed into crevasses. A whooshing sound like that of a large bird of prey flapping its wings caught Lance's ear. Simultaneously, Maggie was warning Sergeant Nix to get down. As the group crouched, concealing the best they could, a figure landed on a large ledge, registering only a faint heat signature to their helmet sensors. It slowly turned, while slightly moving its wings to sniff the air, as if it detected a smell not familiar to it. Then began to make low, melodic chirping sounds that was about to become problematic. Nix and Lee were mesmerized as she stood turning from side to side, displaying the silhouette of her sculpted hourglass figure. It had large, firm breasts, lean muscular arms and legs, and long flowing red hair. It was covered in light hair from just below its navel all the way down to its feet. But the feet were like claws, and they could now see that it had long nails on its fingers. It had a beautiful face with large, luscious lips and with 2 incisor-like teeth visible. But the thing that now stood out most of all were its large, dark, mesmerizing eyes. The Spec next started to move, and Lance, seeing what was happening, put a hand on his face, pushing him down. But it was too late for Sergeant Nix, as his eyes were now locked onto this seductress, no more than 40 feet away. He raised up to step forward, and Maggie sank her sharp fingernails into his wrist to break the spell. But before Lance could stop Spec Lee, a second time, he stood up and stepped forward. Agents Russo and Pizzini, along with Dr. Safadi, were about to have the encounter of a lifetime as they silently rounded a bend to see several dark-cloaked figures standing around a stone altar. Suddenly, the figures backed up and bowed as 3 figures appeared from the convergent tunnel. It was 3 harpies, with the one in the lead having some sort of decoration on its head and around its neck. 5 cloaked figures moved away from a waist-high stone platform, revealing a frightening sight. It was apparently a nude and very sedated young pregnant girl. The head monk, or whatever he was, spoke in a language that caused Dr. Safadi to scratch his head. The 3 huddled tightly against the cave wall, observing as one monk moved close to the stone platform, now standing over the young girl, who started to softly moan and move slowly about on the slab. The monk raised his hands over the young girl and spoke again in this strange language. The monk next to him produced a large cloth in both hands, and another monk unwrapped it, revealing a large shiny dagger. The one who unwrapped it took it in both hands and bowed slightly, presenting it to the head monk. He gripped the knife handle with both hands and held it above his head and began to chant softly. The harpies became agitated, moving their wings and screeching. Agent Russo started to raise the muzzle of his short-barrel silenced 9mm AR. But before he could fire, Agent Pizzini pulled her sidearm and screamed out, "Non si muova!" or "Don't move" in Italian, and all 3 harpies now stared at them. Part 5. Human Vultures. Lance, who had also been slightly mesmerized by the harpy, now recomposed himself and reached up to slap the zombie-like look off of Lee's face. Before he could pull Lee back behind him, it was too late. The harpy turned her head in their direction and let out a loud screech. It then opened its mouth, revealing a row of sharp teeth and 2 large incisors. It stepped off the ledge, hovering and sniffing with its wings whooshing, as this creature cocked its head to the side and sniffed again, as if encountering a smell it had never smelled before. It was now barely 30 feet from Lance, hovering no more than 7 or 8 feet above the ground. Its eyes were fixed on Lance's eyes, and his were fixed on hers. It was as if she was studying him, like some being she had never encountered before. Was this some loner come out into the night in search of prey? Or was this the sentinel put here to detect whatever threats might await its comrades? And Maggie wanted to leap out and subdue this one with a tranquilizer, in hopes of silencing it and breaking the staring match between it and Lance. However, the staring match was interrupted by the sounds of more screeches from deeper in the cave, shortly followed by the whooshing and flapping of multiple wings. The cave extended in either direction from the ledge, and suddenly creatures appeared from both sides. They rapidly rushed the team, and Lance screamed, "Open fire!" But about 5 or 6 of them were already at point-blank range before the first shot was fired. In the catacombs, Agent Lorna Pizzini stood about 10 paces from this evil ceremony, when the monk quickly mumbled some undiscernible incantations. He abruptly raised the dagger to plunge the blade into the young girl's stomach. Lorna took aim with her weapon and put 2 rounds into this bastard's chest, and he fell back onto the ground. The 2 harpies standing behind the lead one rushed Lorna, but before they could reach her, she fired, followed by the sound of 2 automatic bursts of gunfire erupting from Agent Rousseau's compact rifle, dropping both of the creatures. The third one abruptly turned to flee as Rousseau took aim again, but Dr. Safadi screamed, "No!" and ran after it, firing a tranquilizer gun. Rousseau and Pezzini gave chase to the other monks as they fled, while Dr. Safari's short legs propelled him down the tunnel, after the Harpy. Rousseau and Pezzini tackled 2 of the hooded monks, while the other 2 got away. They handcuffed them and led them back to where the young girl was on the slab. They cut her bindings and started giving aid to her, and covered her naked body with a robe she was apparently brought there with. But Dr. Safari was nowhere to be seen. Just as they started calling out to him, his headlamp appeared from the tunnel. When his face became visible, he bore a smile from ear to ear. He had managed to tranquilize, sedate, and zip-tie the 3rd creature. And he excitedly announced, without even clearing his throat, "I have captured their queen!" And just as they were rolling up their operation, all hell was breaking loose for Lance and the team. Back at the cavern, all 4 team members fired at multiple targets as they were slammed into by the Harpies. They were now in close quarter combat for their lives as these she-devils scratched and pawed at them. And Lance screamed out, "Enough of this shit!" and transformed, ripping out the throat of one of the creatures and then breaking another's neck. Suddenly Maggie leapt forward yelling, "Come on, bitches!" as 2 Harpies turned their attention towards her. This gave the other team members the split second they needed to regain their firearms. Maggie leapt up with a tack knife and slashed one of the creature's throat while it tore at her with its nails. She buried her blade deep into another creature's leg, pulling it to the cave floor as it let out an ear-piercing screech. Sergeant Nix regained his AR-12 and began peppering the avian attackers with buckshot. Spec Lee was now out of his daze and firing away with his M4, putting down the rest of the creatures. After making sure all the Harpies were dead, they split up right and left to explore the cavern. Maggie and Sergeant Nix began to encounter more human and animal bones. And suddenly Maggie put her hand up the stub and sniffed the air. She pressed a mic button and said, 4 to 1, get here quick. And Lance replied, 1 Roger, OTW. And as they joined up, Lance's nose started working overtime as he motioned them forward. And as they rounded a bend, tucked away in the cavern was a makeshift nursery where 7 offspring of various sizes lay in their hollowed-out stone cradles, and with 1 lone adolescent Harpy standing guard. Their orders were to capture 1 and destroy the rest. Maggie observed that this young was pregnant and said, let's tranquilize her. Are we doing the right thing? Capturing this creature to be another of Ray's pets? Lance asked. Probably not, said Max. But we best call in the cleaning crew and an exfil chopper. Part 6. Acheron, the River of Painful Decisions. Let's get straight into that. After euthanizing all the Harpy offspring but 1, they prepared the baby and the young pregnant female for transport back to their temporary headquarters. And during the chopper ride, Lance leaned over to Maggie and said, Duda didn't appear this time. I only heard his voice. And they were both puzzled over it. Upon arrival at HQ, they proceeded to debrief where Dr. Safari was ecstatic with excitement over having bagged the Harpy Queen. Ray called the debriefing to order. Ray stood and said, great job, team. We had the old Nosferatu Lucius working on how to communicate with the Harpy Queen. Now, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Safari for his analysis. Safari stood and cleared his throat in stereotypical fashion. We have now gathered specimens of almost all the vampire kingdom. Almost all. Almost all? Asked Maggie. Safari replied, Actually, there are 2 types of harpies. The ones from Greek and Sumerian mythology were part bird, part woman. The other type described as sirens or mermaids of ancient Hebrew and Sumerian lore were half woman and half fish. It is said that these creatures were the earthly women who laid with the fallen angels. Their punishment was being transformed into mermaids, or the sirens of antiquity. Lance stared at Safari with a puzzled look and said,
You mean that mermaids are vampires also? Oh, hell no. There's a reason I didn't become a seal. I don't like the ocean.
The team members chuckled under their breath. Safari smiled, and then with a serious face looked at Lance and Maggie.
It was said that in the time of Babylon, that drinking the menstruum of a virgin harpy was a treatment for blood-borne diseases. Furthermore, eating the afterbirth of a newborn was said to be a cure. Lance, you and Maggie have a choice to make. This may be the only cure for your conditions. There is no guarantee, and it may be the only opportunity to mitigate your circumstances. But the choice is yours, and yours alone.
Are there side effects? Said Maggie. Safari hung his head and spoke softly.
Yes, there are side effects such as anemia, weakness, loss of bone marrow, madness, and possibly even death, of course.
Lance and Maggie looked at each other for a moment, and then Maggie replied, We need time to think about this. Lance then said,
I just don't know. I felt like a guinea pig since this whole thing started. I'm not sure I want to become a lab specimen also.
They stood to leave and looked across the table at Ray. He nodded at them with a sympathetic look and said, Well, you have a difficult decision to make. Take your time. With that, they exited the room and proceeded down the hallway. And as they walked, Lance asked Maggie why she was so quiet, and she replied, Did you find that harpy attractive?
Do what?
Said Lance. Maggie responded, You know, the one you locked eyes with for what seemed like forever. Lance shook his head and said,
Maggie, she was communicating with me telepathically.
Really? Said Maggie. What did she tell you?
Well, she was telling me how I was the perfect mate for she and all of her sisters, and how they could gain rule over all vampires with my offspring, and me as their king.
Max grabbed his arm and they came to a halt in the hallway, with her saying, Well, were you tempted? Lance cracked a smile and said,
Nah, I prefer you. Your legs aren't as hairy.
Maggie firmly punched him in the side, and he let out a loud ouch. She put both of her hands on Lance's face and stared intently into his eyes as he returned a curious look. And she said, Well, it's a good thing you weren't tempted by the Harpies. As she paused, I'm pregnant. Lance's eyes flew wide open as he said,
Wait, what? I thought you... We couldn't.
Yeah, so did I, said Max. And as they continued, Lance shook his head and proclaimed,
I love you, babe. But what are we going to do?
The spirits of Aduda and Lance's father stood in the hallway, observing them, but not allowing themselves to be seen. And Aduda quietly said,
Our work here is done, little fox. From here on, Ghost Soldier alone will decide where his path leads.
Epilogue. The sharing of my fanciful imagination with the Forest of Fear has been a therapeutic joy. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Absolutely chest pounding, edge of your seat action packed story there. And from our good brother from another mother, RICOstories. As I mentioned at the start, guys, this will be Rico's last installment for quite some time, as he takes some time for himself, away from writing, and gather his strength. I want to thank you, Rico, personally, from the bottom of my heart for your constant dedication to this channel, the support, and of course your wonderful friendship. It's been truly an adventure, each and every time, creating these stories and trying to bring an escape for each and every one of our listeners. As you know, the door here is always open for yourself, and I really wish you the best of luck with the future. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you can pen a story, pack in that much punch, then please do get in touch with me at the contact email, which is as on screen. Contact the dead one at gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. As always, guys and girls, I hope you're all well and happy, having a fantastic summer with friends and family, out hiking, backpacking, camping, or maybe you're hitting the boating lake. Whatever it is that you do, I hope you're enjoying it and are giving it your all. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.